No one knew that Dallas had real drama going on behind the scenes. At the age of 84, Linda Gray told the horrible truth. She had to wear a back brace because she worked 22-hour days. Male co-stars made a lot more money, and directors tried to ruin her career when she asked to be a director. Still, that's not the worst lie. This is the shocking truth about what it was like to be Sue Ellen Ewing. Her birthday is September 12, 1940, and she was born in Santa Monica, California. Life in the United States was very different at the time because of World War II. It wasn't very profitable, and petrol was only 11 a gallon. But growing up in Santa Monica was lovely. It was growing quickly and had beaches and a well-known pier. There were changes all around as more and more people moved there. She lived in Culver City, which was close to Hollywood, for most of her youth. Leslie Gray, her dad, owned a watch shop. His job needed him to be patient and pay close attention to details, which Linda later used when she became an actress. An awful lot of movie companies were in Culver City. Some of the most well-known films ever made were shot there, like Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. She was around the business every day, even though she wasn't working in it yet. The store where her dad worked was a big deal in town. Back then, watches weren't cheap or easy to throw away. Few people could find a better watchmaker than Leslie Gray. There, Linda spent a lot of time watching her dad fix small gears and springs with great care. At the time, she didn't know it, but watching him work would help her become a better actor. Even though her family didn't have much money, they were able to live well. She went to a Catholic school called Notre Dame Academy, which was good at both schoolwork and the arts. She played Cinderella in her first play in 1955, which was at school. Though she was scared, she really wanted to do it again after the show. It was the start of something big. Her neighborhood was very close to Hollywood, so she met famous stars from time to time. They met briefly, but fondly at a nearby shop when she was 15 years old. The famous redhead looked good with Linda's chestnut hair. It wasn't much, but she remembered it. It helped her see that famous people were just people. She might also be one. In the early 1960s, she made her first move in a show business, but not as an actor. Instead, as a model. A talent agent saw her while she was waiting at a bus stop. She stood 5 feet 7 inches tall and had strong features that made her stand out. In 1961, she got her first job as a model because of that moment. A small clothes store hired her to pose for them, and she made $25 that day. It wasn't much, but it was something. By 1963, she had signed with the Ford modeling agency and was in print ads for well-known names. Her face looked good with a lot of different styles and items for the home and in fashion. In 1964, she did an ad for Coca-Cola that was one of her best early jobs. Just her smile increased sales by 8% in Southern California. In the 1960s, there were a lot of ads on TV, and she was a great fit. In the years 1965 to 1975, she was in 387 ads. She became one of the most recognizable faces in ads because of this. Some people in the business even called her the queen of commercials. In 1968, she worked for Playtex Bras and got paid a lot. She worked for 3 days and got $50,000, a sum that is worth more than $370,000 now. Not only in the US did she do well. In 1969, she was one of the first American models to be in ads in Japan. She was in an Asian-wide ad for Shiseido Cosmetics. This made her even more famous and gave her more chances to work as an actress. It was one of the weirdest and most unexpected events in her career, and no one knew about it in 1967. It was that year that The Graduate came out, and its movie cover is now one of the most famous in history. There was a woman's leg across the middle of the poster, with Dustin Hoffman standing in the center. That leg was thought to belong to Anne Bancroft, who played Mrs. Robinson in the movie for many years. But Linda Gray told the truth in 2013. In fact, it was her leg. The picture shoot took place at Paramount Studios on August 19, 1967. When Anne Bancroft couldn't work that day, the studio called Linda at the last minute. She was 27 years old and had no idea that she was about to do something important in history. She held her leg still for 3 hours while the shooter, Bob F. I took more than 100 shots. They finally got the shot. For the job, she was only paid $25, which is about $200 today. One simple release form was all she had to do. No one ever praised her. The picture went on to sell millions of copies and become one of the most famous movie images ever. The truth was kept hidden for many years. No one knew, not even Dustin Hoffman. It shocked him when he learned about it in 2016. Linda joked, "I've been paid more for my legs than for my acting." She was still linked to The Graduate, though. In 2001, when she was 61 years old, she was chosen to play Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate on stage in London. It was a surprise when Linda Gray started acting. She got her first job in Hollywood in 1962 when she was 22 years old, but not the way most people do. She wasn't on screen with a line or a role. It was her leg. She was chosen to stand in for Anne Bancroft's leg on the movie poster for Graduate. Why? These people thought her leg looked better. In 1963, she finally got some small parts in films, but things didn't go nicely with those either. She was cast as a college girl in Under the Yum Tree. She had words at first, but they were cut right before the movie was shot. The reason wasn't good. The movie's star, Jack Lemmon, thought she was too charming and didn't want her to draw attention away from him. For years, she didn't talk about this. She was in Palm Springs weekend that same year, but only because she was visiting a friend on set. When the director saw her, she gave her a small part right away. But there was something wrong. They paid her in cash instead of union dues because she wasn't a member of the Screen Actors Guild. By the 1970s, she had small parts on TV, but nothing came easily. She was supposed to play a strong, sure-of-herself woman in Marcus Welby, MD. However, her part was completely changed just 2 days before filming. Now she was a patient who was easy to hurt. Why? They changed her part because the show's star, Robert Young, wanted her to have more emotional scenes. She had to learn a whole new story in one night. It was hard for her, but she did it, and the producers were pleased. In 1976, while she was shooting Switch, one of the strangest things that ever happened to her happened. In one scene, she had to hit Robert Wagner. His demand that she really hit him meant that she did. He got hit so hard by her during the last take that it left a mark on his face. On set, there was a lot of stress, but people didn't get mad at her because the scene looked so real. Then in 1977, she played a part that changed the world. Norman Lear made the show All That Glitters, and she was cast as Linda Merkland. Making history was the job. It was the first time a transgender character was a main character on an American TV show when she played a transgender woman. But no one knew about this choice until the very end. She wasn't sure when she found out. She even thought about giving up. Norman Lear got her to agree by setting up a meeting with a trans woman from San Francisco. Then Gray changed her mind after a long talk. She did something crazy to get ready for the part. She lived as a man for 2 weeks. She tied a rope around her chest and practiced being a man. She tried to use a women's toilet one day while dressed this way, but she was turned away. That moment helped her really understand how hard things were for trans people. For its time, the show was brave. It imagined a world where men and women had different jobs, but no one was ready for that to happen. Before it even played, advertisers pulled their ads, and some TV stations wouldn't show it. A past scene that showed Linda Merkland before she transitioned caused a lot of debate. To make the effect, they didn't hire a new actor. Instead, they put a lot of makeup and prosthetics on Gray. People thought this was a big deal at the time, but now that it's over, some have said it was a mistake not to hire a trans actress. The show ended quickly. Even though it ended after only 13 weeks, it made an impression that will last. They had never seen anyone on TV who looked like them before. She became a champion for LGBTQ+ rights after receiving a letter from a 16-year-old in Ohio that moved her so much. Then Dallas showed up. Gray got the part of Sue Ellen Ewing in 1978, and it changed her life. She almost didn't get the part, though. Someone else, Mary Fran, was first offered the part but turned it down. Gray had no idea that she was being thought about. Her agent sent the picture to the magazine without telling her. When she was asked to try out, she didn't have time to get ready. She quickly used a southern voice she had heard earlier that day in a grocery store. The directors liked her improvised part, and she got the job. Sue Ellen wasn't meant to be a main figure at first. Gray was only hired for 5 shows, in the same way that J.R. wife of Ewing. But her performance was so strong that the writers gave her a bigger part. Sue Ellen had grown into one of the most interesting and complicated characters on the show by the end of the season. It's not just a TV show. Everyone was obsessed with it. It was shown in over 90 countries. And when JR 350 million people around the world were shot. Who did it? It was unusual for that many people to watch a soap show during prime time. The show made a big difference everywhere, even where you wouldn't have thought. The government in communist Romania let it air because they thought it would show how bad capitalism was. But it didn't make people hate rich people. It did the opposite. People saw wealth, freedom, and power and wanted it all. Dallas made the fall of communism look more likely. Fans still found a way to do it in the Soviet Union, even though it was against the law. People got together in secret to watch hazy episodes of VHS tapes that were being sold on the black market. The show wasn't just fun, it had an effect on politics too. People were afraid about who shot JR during the 1980 US election. You could find the phrase on bumper stickers, buttons, and even election ads. The GOP made jokes, and the Democrats shot JR. At the same time, the show changed how people around the world thought about America. It wasn't just oil millionaires from Texas. It was about having too much power, desire, and fun. Some people liked it. Many people thought it was the worst thing about America. There was no way to ignore it. The show was even more memorable because Linda Gray played Sue Ellen. She could have been just another supporting character as JR's alcoholic wife, but she made Sue Ellen one of the most complicated and sad characters on TV. At the time, her battle with addiction was very open and honest, which wasn't often seen on TV. For the part, she even changed how she looked. She skipped her normal 2-hour makeup routine and did it in just 20 minutes, which made her drunk scenes seem more real. One of the most stressful times was when Sue Ellen, who was pregnant and still struggling with alcoholism, broke out of a mental hospital. It shocked, broke my heart, and changed the world all at the same time. Gray's show wasn't just about showing her drunk, though. She wrote about every part of Sue Ellen's pain. The clear times, the failed attempts to get better, and the constant fights with her demons. People didn't just look at her, she made them feel. People did notice how well she did. When she was up for an Emmy in 1981, she was up against her co-star Barbara Bel Geddes. She was also nominated for 2 Golden Globes, which showed that real acting could shine even in a field that people often write off as filler. These awards were more than just personal honors. They helped Dallas look good and kept it on top for many years. Gray was in 13 of the 14 seasons of the show. She even won awards in other countries, like the Bambi Award in Germany and the Il Gatto Award in Italy. The Hollywood Radio and Television Society named her Woman of the Year in 1982. Not just for her playing, but also for the things she did outside of acting. But who shot JR was the most important thing in Dallas. When JR was shot in the season finale in March 1980, the story began. The world was crazy about it for 8 months. Everyone had their own ideas. 83 million Americans watched when the answer was finally given in November. Over 350 million people around the world watched. It was the most exciting thing to ever happen on TV. What became popular was the phrase, "Who shot JR?" It was on clothes and buttons, and world leaders even talked about it. The Queen Mother herself asked Larry Hagman, who played JR, about it. Jim Carter joked that he could get money for his campaign in the US if he knew who did it. That one plot changed TV for good. It wasn't like that on TV shows before Dallas. But after Who Shot JR, everyone made their own. It became the model for keeping people interested. The effects are still felt today, after many years. It was even made fun of by The Simpsons in Who Shot Mr. Burns. Living a bad life on the set of Dallas was Linda Gray. From 1978 to 1991, she worked 16-hour days, 6 days a week, from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., which were very hard on her. It was even worse during big shows like the famous Who Shot JR scene. She worked 22 hours straight on July 15, 1980, from 4:30 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. the next day. That IT was very hard. She had to drink about 6 cups of coffee every day just to stay awake because the long hours were painful. The job was hard on the body. She had terrible back pain after wearing high shoes for hours on end. By season 5, things were so bad that she had to hide a back brace under Sue Ellen's fancy outfits during breaks. Things got worse in the early morning. She had to set her face by 4 a.m. to get ready for a 6 a.m. time to call. It was too much for her, and by the end of each season, she had lost 10 to 15 pounds. But it was just as hard on the mind. Her lines had to be learned by heart every day, and the script would change just hours before shooting. In season 7, she had one of her worst weeks, when she filmed 18 emotional scenes in 5 days, including the dramatic scene with Sue Ellen and her drunk drive. It was too much stress for me to sleep. She only got about 4 hours of sleep a night when she was shooting. As the years went by, Gray and the show's makers began to fight. She wanted to have a bigger role in Sue Ellen's stories, but the directors kept putting her down. At the end of the 1982 to 1983 season, she lost it. She got very angry with executive director Leonard Katzman on March 15, 1983, over a scene that made Sue Ellen look too weak. Gray wouldn't shoot it the way it was written, and she and Katzman were face-to-face for 4 hours. In the end, they came to an agreement. But it made things worse between her and the production team. She also wanted to direct shows, but she was turned down over and over again while her male co-stars, Larry Hagman and Patrick Duffy, were given the chance. Not until season 9, in an episode called Sitting Ducks, did she finally get the chance to direct. Even that only happened because she said she was going to leave and Larry Hagman stepped in to help her. Gray also pushed for better plots. She didn't want Sue Ellen to be JR's unhappy wife. In 1989, she persuaded the writers to let Sue Ellen run for office, which the mostly male writers at first refused to do. It was hard for her to be creative, which was a problem for many women in Hollywood at the time. Years later, Gray talked about the sexism she faced on the show. She said hello on March 8, 2023, when she was 82 years old. Magazine that, to be honest, Dallas was a show that treated men badly. It wasn't just a little sexism. It was made to work that way. Many times, her worries and ideas were brushed off. And when it came to pay, she found that her male co-stars were making a lot more than she was. She learned that they were making tens of thousands more per show, which added up to $1 million for the whole season. She was an important part of the show's main plots, but she wasn't given enough credit. Even though it was annoying, she didn't give up. Instead, she fought even harder. Choosing who would direct was one of the biggest fights. In 1985, she asked to direct an episode after 7 years of playing Sue Ellen. That wasn't a ridiculous ask. Hagman and Duffy had both directed more than one show before, but the producers turned her down right away. Their reason? They would have to let all the women on the show direct if they let her. Gray had already talked to her female co-stars, and none of them were interested in directing, so this didn't make sense. It wasn't fair that they turned you down. It was meant to keep women from getting power. She didn't give up. She went back to the producers, and this time showed proof of her skills and the backing of her co-stars. But once more, they said no. It became clearer as they pushed back. It wasn't enough to just direct one show. It was about the bigger problem of women in Hollywood not getting the same chances as guys. 1986 was the year when things finally broke down. Gray made it clear in the contract talks for season 9 that she would leave the show if she didn't get the chance to direct. The makers didn't try to make a deal. They fired her instead. It was a shocking choice. She had been up for 2 Golden Globes and an Emmy. A lot of people liked her. Still, they'd rather lose her than give her the same chances as her male co-stars. The firing didn't last long, though. A big star on the show, Larry Hagman, found out and wasn't happy. He said he would quit if Gray wasn't hired back. They didn't have a choice. They took her back and finally let her lead. On November 7, 1986, her first show aired, and it did well. She went on to direct 3 more shows over the next few seasons, showing that she was just as good behind the camera as she was in front of it. It wasn't just a personal win for her to be able to direct. That moment stood for the greater fight for equal rights for women in Hollywood. She got married to Ed Thrasher on April 28, 1962, when she was only 21 years old. She knew she was wrong from the first night of their honeymoon. He left her at the hotel in Acapulco by herself on their first full day together. That was just the start. He was in charge of everything. She told him she wanted to be an actor, but he told her she couldn't until their kids were grown up and in college. That meant having to wait almost 20 years. She didn't even feel like a wife because she felt stuck. Just someone who lives next door. He made every choice. They moved because he wanted to live on a ranch. He did not care about her needs. His plans were more important than hers, so she had to stay home with the kids and raise them. She didn't have a voice, anyone to talk to, or a way out. But she got the strength to leave after years of being ignored. In secret, she hired a house in Malibu. She planned everything and then told Thrasher she was done. On November 14, 1983, they got a divorce. She was finally free after 21 years. She was thankful for her 2 kids, even though her marriage had been hard. The worst thing that ever happened to her happened next. Her son died on November 23, 2020. He was 56 years old. AML, or acute myeloid leukemia, is a cancer that kills. He had been fighting it. Linda wrote on Instagram that he had died, calling him the nicest, best, and sweetest person who everyone loved. She was so proud of him because he had made a living as a TV producer and director. It hurt to see him go through treatment, and COVID-19 made things even worse. She held on to the memories after he died. After a few days, she wrote on Facebook about how he always cut the turkey and made his special cranberry sauce for Thanksgiving. She was different after the loss. She became a member of the Farrah Fawcett Foundation in 2022 to help fight cancer. In 2023, she said that Jeff's death had rocked her to her core and that more needed to be done. She also spoke out about leukemia, saying that 20,000 people in the US get AML every year and that recovery rates are low. She felt empty after Jeff died. It wasn't just her son. She liked him a lot. He died when he was only 56 years old. Now, the only thing she could do to honor him was help other people. After the end of Dallas in 1989, Linda Gray had to decide what to do next. Being Sue Ellen Ewing for 11 years was enough for her. It was time for a change. Her first part was as Hillary Michaels on Melrose Place in 1994. She was Amanda Woodward's mother, and Heather Locklear played her. They made a whole new show around her because people liked her character so much. Models Incorporated was the name of the show, where she played the boss of a Los Angeles modeling firm. From Sue Ellen, this was a big change. She stopped being a weak woman and became a tough businesswoman who ran things her way. It was a bad show, though. It had to go up against other big TV shows, and critics didn't think much of it. It didn't work out, even though Carrie-Anne Moss, who would later play in The Matrix, was in the cast. That was the end of Models Incorporated after only one season. She didn't stop there, though. She kept playing and had small parts on different TV shows. She played a sad mother in the 1997 movie Touched by an Angel. A few years before, she lived in the UK for a while and played Lady Jane Felsham in 9 episodes of Lovejoy from 1992 to 1994. She was in a number of TV films, such as Moment of Truth, Why My Daughter, about teen pregnancy, and Accidental Meeting, about stalking. She could show that she wasn't just a soap opera star in these parts. She could play many different roles. Then she did something rather different. She played Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate in 2001, which was a big deal, living it up on stage in London's West End. Not only was she 60 years old, but she was taking on a famous part with a naked scene that made everyone talk. She did 8 shows a week for 4 months, which showed that she was good at theater. So many people loved her performance that she was asked to go to Broadway in 2002 and filled in for Kathleen Turner for a short time. She was very excited about this part because years ago, her legs, not in Bancroft's, were used in the famous movie image for Graduate. It felt like going around in a circle. She kept working on stage after that. This was a stage version of the Oscar-winning movie, and she played Aurora Greenaway in it in 2007. The play went on tour in the UK, letting people know she was serious about theater. Then, after the reboot of Dallas was canceled in 2014, she played the fairy godmother in Cinderella in London, which was a very different part. She showed she could do anything by playing role after role, from Mrs. Robinson to a magical fairy godmother. She cared about more than just acting, though. She was made a Goodwill representative for the UN Population Fund in 1998. It wasn't just a title. She worked hard to improve the health of women all over the world. She went to different places, met women, and listened to their problems. To see the problems women faced, she went to Nicaragua in 1997, even before she was officially given the job. She went to hospitals, health centers, and rural towns. She tried to improve reproductive health, make sure men and women had the same rights, and stop harmful practices like female genital mutilation. She wasn't a doctor or politician, but she thought the best way to make change was to listen to people. That she kept this job until 2007 shows she wasn't just an actor. She was someone who tried to change things for the better. Then, in 2015, she added another record. She wrote books. The Road to Happiness is Always Under Construction is the name of the book she wrote. Not only was it a famous story, but it was also a memoir and a guide to living a good life. She talked about her own problems, like having polio as a child, having an alcoholic mother, and being in a marriage that hurt her personally. She was married to Ed Thrasher for 22 years. That part of the book shocked me the most. She talked about how she had followed his rules for 16 years until she finally chose to take an acting class. Making that choice changed her life and brought her to Dallas. She talked about health, eating organically, which she did long before it was cool, and how to feel good about getting older. People liked the book because it was honest and made them think. Some people didn't like how open she was. They thought she was too nice to herself or too harsh on her ex-husband. She continued to tell women to take charge of their lives in interviews and public speaking events after the book came out.